Hi, I'm Lynda Wharton. Welcome to the first ever Well Woman show brought to you from Auckland, New Zealand. As today is my very first show, I thought I'd spend some time sharing with you a little of my background so you know more about the person speaking to you each week on the Well Woman show. I live here in beautiful Auckland, New Zealand, where I've lived for the last 30 years of a wide range of common female health complaints. Many of my women patients are seeking help and support for a wide variety of women's health complaints, including menstrual problems, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, unexplained infertility, care during pregnancy, and of course, midlife transition through the menopausal years. When I was 19 years old, I was a psychology student at Auckland University. I had my heart set on becoming a psychologist, but fate was to intervene in the form of ill health. In my last year at uni, I became chronically unwell with a chronic fatigue type syndrome. I was exhausted all of the time. Getting out of bed in the morning was a huge struggle, and taking in information in lectures seemed almost impossible. That, combined with constant throat infections, led me to a variety of GPs and specialists looking for answers to my health problems. When all my test results were normal, I was told it was all in my mind, which it most certainly wasn't. At that time I also worked part-time in a bookstore here in Auckland, and one of the amazing women I worked with was an elderly woman by the name of Mary. Mary was in her mid-60s and just a picture of vitality and good health. She hadn't seen a GP for 30 years, not something I would necessarily recommend, but for those 30 years Mary had been kept in peak health by her naturopath, David Duggan. Mary suggested that perhaps I could benefit from seeing her naturopath. I had no idea what a naturopath was, but I was willing to try anything. I remember my appointment day, the day that was to change my life, as if it was yesterday. I made my way to the top of the staircase in one of Auckland's old central city buildings. I pushed open the door to the waiting room and stepped into a tiny office. There were 5 or 6 elderly women sitting on couches, drinking what I now know as carrot juice. I remember that appointment with David because it was so unlike anything I'd experienced ever before. He spent probably a good 40 minutes just talking to me about my life, talking to me about my relationships, how I fit into my family, my living situation, what was I eating. He was really interested in my diet. What was I drinking? How much sleep was I getting at night? And was I exercising, and if so, how much? All the things that I now routinely ask my patients. But you see, none of the doctors I'd been to had bothered to ask me any of these seemingly fairly basic questions. And the truth was that my illness was a direct result of the daily living choices I was making. You see, I was a typical teenage university student. My choices were terrible. I had very little sleep, and I'd often study into the wee small hours, propping myself up with endless cups of coffee and quick fix sugars. I made no time in my life for exercise. In fact, the most exercise I got was getting on and off the bus to get to university. My diet was abysmal. I often ate takeaways, and I was a total sugar junkie. When I look at it now, it's hardly surprising that my health finally gave up after 3 years of living like this. My chronic fatigue problem was simply a result of my lifestyle. And with David's help, I gradually changed my lifestyle and the way I was eating, started sleeping a lot more and exercising every day. And hey presto, 6 to 8 weeks later, I was starting to become a picture of health. So I finished that degree, I got my psychology degree, and I travelled for a year. And during that year it became abundantly clear to me that my future lay in holistic medicine. I was so impressed and I was so relieved to have my health back that I wanted to emulate what David had done for me, and I wanted to give other women and men the gift of health that I now had. I went on to complete my naturopathic degree, followed by a degree in traditional Chinese medicine, and I have enjoyed 23 incredibly rewarding years working with women from all walks of life in my clinic in Auckland. During that time, I've been lucky enough to have a second career as a health researcher and a public speaker and a writer. And I'm the author of 3 women's health books, the latest of which, published by HarperCollins, is called Wellbeing. Have you ever been in a situation like me where you've just been driving the car and you've caught something on the radio that's piqued your interest, some new stunning headline about health? You've returned home, popped it into your Google search box and pressed the send button, and been deluged with 1.2 million hits. Then you start reading the top 10 responses and you realise that each of them tells you something quite different. It's confusing, isn't it? So how are you, the typical woman without a health research background, supposed to make sense of the myriad of conflicting health information that you're bombarded with every day? That's where the Well Woman Show comes in. Each week when we meet, I'm going to be talking with you about some particularly topical area of women's health. And I'm going to be the bridge between the headlines and the truth. Together, we'll unfold some of the most topical areas of women's health. We'll look at the headlines, the truth, and the myths. And from that, I'm going to give you practical, useful information to enrich your own well-being and that of your family. At the moment, one of the areas that most of my patients are asking me about is whether they should stop taking their daily woman's multi. You see, they've read the headlines that a multi a day can actually increase your risk of breast cancer. Pretty frightening stuff, but is there really more to the story than meets the eye? Many of my midlife patients are asking me whether they should stop taking their daily calcium tablet. Traditionally, they've taken calcium to support their bone health as they become menopausal and beyond. That was until the headlines telling them that their calcium tablet, yes, it may be benefiting their bones, but at the same time it might be clogging up their arteries and increasing their risk of cardiovascular disease. That's a dilemma. What are they to do? Should they stop taking the calcium and risk bone problems, or should they continue taking the calcium only to end up as a cardiovascular statistic down the track? So if you're interested in knowing the truth behind the headlines, I invite you on board. Come on in and join me weekly here on the Well Woman Show. Thank you.